Hello again, everybody. This is Brother Chooch for Thinking Out Loud About the End Times. This is Night Watch, a nighttime fellowship for those who are awaiting the soon return of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, to pull us out of this backwards bureaucracy and into the clouds where we will see Him face to face for the first time and be changed, and then He will take us to the place that He's been preparing for us for 2,000 years. Thus we'll be with the Lord forevermore. That is our blessed hope. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you're having a great Mother's Day, especially for mothers out there. We want to let you know we appreciate you. We hope that you had a very special day because you are very special. And thank you for taking the time to tune in to Night Watch. Now, give me a thumbs up if you guys could hear me okay, so we could move forward because we have questions to cover. Very important questions to cover. Now, if you're like me, okay, I think you guys could hear me okay. Yeah, I think so. All right, we'll go with it. If you're like me, you are watching intently for the possible return of our Lord and Savior any day. Just because He hasn't returned yet does not mean He's never coming. Let me say that again. Just because He hasn't returned yet doesn't mean He's never coming. That's absolutely a ridiculous thought, to think that there's no rapture just because He hasn't come yet. It's a one-time event, guys. He comes for His bride one time, and then there's other prophetic things that will happen afterwards. And it will happen at His appointed time. We know the season. We don't know the day, but we know we're in the season. So if we're in the season and we know He's going to fulfill His promise, we keep watching. We don't set dates. We don't try to put all our eggs in one basket and say, if He doesn't come by X amount of days, then I'm tapping out. We don't do that. If you're wise, you don't do that. I think equally foolishly would be to dismiss His return because you're tired of waiting, or you have become a bit disappointed or weary or discouraged. And I would encourage you, try to get out of that state as quick as you can. Because the last thing you want to do is be in a place where you're waiting, then you give up, and shortly thereafter He comes back, and then you're not too happy with yourself because you gave up when it was so close. Now, having said that, it doesn't have to do with if you're going to be raptured or not. It may have to do with rewards and crowns, perhaps. We know that there's a crown for those who love His appearing. But I would encourage you to keep waiting. Keep waiting. The night could only last so long, and then the morning must come. Now, when it's 2 or 3 in the morning, it seems like, especially if you can't sleep, seems like the night's going to last forever. But at some point, you see the crack of the dawn, and the daylight appears, and you know that morning has arrived. And we need, especially in the stark world that we live in, to keep on keeping on. So thanks for you guys, as I could say pretty consistently. There's many prayer warriors out there. There's many encouragers out there. There's many saints who are very excited about the Lord's return. And that is why from time to time Tia Well posts for the opportunity for anybody to put down a prayer request so that you could get involved in praying for one another. Additionally, we have a monthly prayer relay, which is on a particular topic or subject in which we sign up for 10-minute increments and pray for that subject and proverbially pass the prayer baton to the next person signed up. And basically for 12 hours straight, we have prayer for that particular subject. Last Saturdays, is it Saturday? I believe it was last Saturdays. Actually, not yesterday, but the Saturday before. Prayer was for children. And a much needed subject for prayer. So I'm thankful for anyone who took the time to pray for that. Now, concerning the times that we live in right now, I believe that there are 4 questions that I would like to ask. And if these 4 questions get answered positively, let's say, with a yes, then I would probably be very reassured that the rapture and the tribulation period would happen this year. Now, you would say, what possible questions can I possibly pose? Well, the question isn't, will the rapture happen in 2024? It's not that direct. But there are 4 questions of current things that are happening right now that I believe are still in play that could go this way or could go that way. And if it goes a certain way, then I'm pretty confident that this might be it. So I have 4 questions, and I'm going to present one at a time, try to explain why I believe it's important, why it relates to the rapture, why it relates to the nearness of his return. Okay, you ready? Okay, here we go. Question number 1. Was the Great American Solar Eclipse a warning to the United States? Now, I know how people are, and I'm like this. I was like this a little bit, but not so much anymore. When a potential sign happens and something doesn't happen on that day, people shrug their shoulders and say, oh, a big nothing burger, and they dismiss it and go on. I would caution against that. I am still deciding whether what happened on April 8th of 2024 is of prophetic significance or not. Now, we have to take a look at what has happened, not just this past April, but we also have to look at what happened 7 years ago. Because 7 years ago was the first passing of the Great American Solar Eclipse. And this is actually the second passing, which made an X over the United States, over an area of southern Illinois that is known as Little Egypt. We know the first passing of the solar eclipse over America went over seven or so Salems, which means peace. And this most recent one went over, and I'll pop that up here if you can see, went over Ninevehs, 8 Ninevehs. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, if the Great American Solar Eclipse was a warning to the U.S., and if you're familiar with the story of Nineveh, Nineveh has to do with the capital of Assyria, where Jonah was sent to prophesy against them that in 40 days Nineveh will be destroyed. And so some people, when they heard all this talk about the Great American Solar Eclipse, They heard Nineveh this, Nineveh that. They heard other things that are being said. But then there was this voice that was saying, oh, you guys are making a big deal out of nothing. The totality of the eclipse only goes over 2 Ninevehs. So this is where the Wascal Wabbit comes into play, because we need his help. He really helps me a lot in pointing things out here. So let me see if I could get him. I know he's a little shy, but I also know he's a great worker. There he is. There he is. Okay. So they're saying just because 2 were in the totality that it didn't hold any significance. But if you look closely here, yeah, the darker pink area is the totality, and maybe 2, maybe 3 Ninevehs were crossed. But then you have an area of about 90%, maybe 80% at worst, covers all 8 Ninevehs. Okay, so all 8 Ninevehs in the United States saw significant coverage of the eclipse. Not only that, but the other thing that's absolutely, I think, riveting, because we're not a big fan of the word coincidence at TOL, especially in the days that we live in. But what is interesting is that there's actually only 8 Ninevehs in the entire world. There's only 8 cities in the entire world currently that are named Nineveh. Now, why would you name a city Nineveh? I have no idea. In fact, Nineveh eventually did get destroyed. But to think that this eclipse passed over 8 of the Ninevehs, 7 in the United States and 1 in Canada. And if you look closely here, you could basically say all the Ninevehs are pretty much to the central and eastern part of the United States, where if this crossing of this eclipse, let's say, happened towards, let's say, California to maybe the Dakotas, you certainly wouldn't have all the Ninevehs exposed. But I just find it peculiar. I'm not a good enough historian to know why all the Ninevehs are positioned where they're positioned, but in God's divine plan of things, I believe that He sovereignly wanted it this way. You see where all these stars are, by the way? I'm sorry I didn't let you know. Where the stars are the Ninevehs. Where the red dots are, so these are Ninevehs. All the stars are Ninevehs. You can see how they pass through, right? This circle here is Eagle Pass. This circle here is called the Star of Egypt. This is the part of Illinois that is where you have Little Egypt. Then all these little red ones here. I believe there's 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I count 6. Wait a second. 1. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. 7 Salems. Right? Now, the first passing that went like this to about here had, it passed through a whole bunch of Salems, right? And then over here to here, got a whole bunch of Salems. But there was no Ninevehs on the first passing. Now, I'm not sure if the first passing caught a couple Ninevehs. Could have. I'm not sure. But anyways, the second time around had a whole bunch of these Ninevehs. There's also some unique things that happened with this eclipse. Like, for example, it went over the only city or town in the entire world named Rapture, which is, right, kind of crazy. Rapture, Indiana. And it also went over a place, Jonah, Texas. Get that theme, right, of the story of Jonah. And again, Eagle Pass it entered, and then it exits through Mars Hill. It also goes through a place called Bride and a town named Groom, Texas. So you just can't. If you want to say this is all coincidence. Now, I can't say all this makes it an official sign of God. Can't say that for sure. But the question still beckons, was the Great American Solar Eclipse a warning to the United States? More specifically, can we go further and say, could this have been a 40-day warning? Like Nineveh got a 40-day warning. Could this be a 40-day warning? Well, we're going to find out really soon, because the 40th day will be May 18th, 2024, and that comes up in about 6 days from now. Matter of fact, Saturday night is when our Jewish friends, will celebrate, and on the dusk of Saturday night into Sunday, Pentecost, Feast of Weeks. Now, I'm of the camp, I am persuaded that Shavuot may be this coming weekend, but Pentecost is another 50 days out from there, and that falls nicely right when you have the end of the wheat harvest and the beginning of the new wine. So I would say that that's really a high watch zone. And if I get my vote in, because I've been holding back on the TOL voting for RapCon 1, I'm holding on to RapCon 2 until we get into August, July, August, September area. That to me is, I'm not saying the Lord can't come sooner. He could certainly, but that, boy, I love the pictures in that time frame. But anyways, the United States, could they be in trouble in a week? I don't know. I really don't know. But we're going to keep an eye out. Now, so what does this mean? Well, in my own reasoning, I would say let's give this sign a good year. If we get to 2025 and we get to, let's say, August, September range of 2025, and we're still here, the United States is still doing relatively well, and obviously there's been no judgment going on, I'm really going to be scratching my head about the Great American Solar Eclipse. Was this a sign? I believe it is, but if we get into deep 2025, I'm going to be like, if this was a sign, I'm having trouble figuring out what it's pointing to. Right now, because 7 years ago we had the first half of this, the second half was completed, I can't imagine, and again, I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine it was 7 years to the second part of the sign, and then we're looking at another 7 years before something actually happens. I mean, it could be. That spans over a 14-year space of time. Again, God's a lot more patient than I am. But we're going to find out. So that's question number one. So if the answer to this is, was the Great American Solar Eclipse a warning to the United States? And if the answer is yes, I think that's going to lend itself to the tribulation period being very, very, very soon, because I believe that the judgment of the United States may be in the very early stages or right before the tribulation period. All right? So that's question number one. Question number two. This is a bit similar, but a little bit different. Oh, that's kind of rude to point. Wapja wabbit. Watch that stick. Be nice now. So if we look at this question here, I'm going to take this question down. I'm going to put this question up. Was the Revelation 12 sign a 7-year warning? That's the next question I'd like answered. Now, if you were like me back in 2017, this was really an intriguing sign. And at the time, I believed that this was maybe a sign that was going to happen on the day of the rapture. So on September 23rd, 2017, I was rapture ready. I was bags packed. Now, I wasn't on my rooftop, but I had the proverbial ladder leaning up to the roof. I mean, I was really, really ready to roll. So if the Revelation 12 sign obviously was not a sign of the rapture on that day, and boy, did we look at this. Was it a 2-year? I looked at it as, could it be, okay, the length of a time of a pregnancy from the Revelation 12 sign? Was it a 1-year warning? Was it a 2-year warning? Was it a 5-year warning? But we know that the number 7 is super significant, especially when it comes to prophecy. The book of Revelation is replete with the number 7. It would make a lot of sense in my mind that it was a 7-year warning. Now, keep this in mind. The Revelation 12 sign happened on the Feast of Trumpets back in 2017. If you look at what Revelation 12, 1, 2, and I would add 3 and 4 to that, it seems to be giving the picture of the woman in labor, which I think is a picture of Israel, gives birth to the child, which I believe is a picture of the church, because the church comes from, it's considered the Judeo-Christian religion. It came from Judaism. We recognize Jesus as the Messiah, where Israel, for the most part, hasn't. So the baby's birthed because the church now is complete, because the church age comes to an end. The great dragon is waiting for the baby to be birthed so he could try to snatch the baby, destroy and swallow the baby before the baby can, live, sustain itself. And the baby is harpazoed into heaven. Not the lady. The woman goes out into the wilderness. So saved Israel will still be on earth. But the baby is snatched away before the dragon could devour the baby. So to me, this is a picture of the baby being birthed, the baby being taken into heaven, that's the rapture, and the woman, remnant Israel, now having to flee away from the Antichrist. Okay? So this is a picture of right before the trib and the trib. So if the Lord intentionally had the sign happen on what? The Jewish Feast of Trumpets back in 2017, and it's a 7-year sign. Could that be speaking of that the tribulation period this is a 7-year warning, may be pointing to the Feast of Trumpets in 2024? Wow. And which would make wonderful sense, because if you're on the thinking of if the rapture happens at the end of the wheat harvest and the beginning of the new wine, all this together would really point to late summer, early fall. You have rapture and trib. And it just seems to go really nicely together. Now, I'll tell you what. How do we get our answer of yes or no to this question? Was the Revelation 12 sign a 7-year warning? Very simply, if the fall season comes and goes in 2024 around the time of September, October-ish, and we're still here, the answer to that will be no. And if we are raptured during that time, I will, and probably you on the way up, will be screaming with joy, yes, yes, yes. The Revelation 12 sign was a 7-year warning. We'll be so happy to be able to say that. So that's question number 2. Question number 3 I would like to get answered is this one. What we're currently seeing right now in the Middle East, is this the start of the Psalm 83 war? Now, there's many people in the prophecy and the watching community that would say an emphatic yes to this. Now, we're not clear of how long this war takes, and we're not exactly sure the course of this war. We just know pretty accurately who the participants will be in this war, if you believe that this war still has to happen, and that the Lord himself, through Israel, will gain victory over these nations. Now, if we look at our map here, this is what we're dealing with. You have this inner circle. These are the ancient names mentioned in Psalm 83, verses 6 and 8. This is the Confederation, right? So the modern day counterparts of these ancient nations will be at war with Israel, and Israel will defeat them. Now, we could clearly see that Philistia, which is the area of Gaza, is very much in play. Very much in play right now. They're at war. You could see these other nations, and I'm going to pull this up so we have a look at the modern day cities, or the modern day current nations, rather, that these could be related to. Let's take a look here. Tents of Edom, Palestinians and southern Jordanians, the Ishmaelites, the Saudis, Moab, the Palestinians and central Jordanians, Hagarines, the Egyptians, Gibal, Hezbollah and northern Lebanese, Amman, Palestinians and northern Jordanians, Amalek, Arabs of the Sinai area, Philistia, Hamas of the Gaza Strip, Tyre, Hezbollah and southern Lebanese, Assyria, Syrians, and northern Iraqis. So if you look at this, it's spellbounding. Shouldn't use that, really. It's just absolutely, I think, mind-boggling to think that this was prophesied thousands of years ago. And here we are in 2024, and we are seeing this come to be. I mean, look at this. Look at this. I mean, Palestinians. You got in three of these areas here, you got the Palestinians with tents of Edom, Moab, and Ammon. And then look at all the Jordanians. 1, 2, you got Jordanians here, Lebanon. I mean, this is all very Hezbollah. Cabal. Look at this. Folks, this is all possible. Now, if you look at the question, right? Look at the question, is this the start of the Psalm 83 war? Well, you certainly got the Palestinians, and you certainly got Hezbollah. And I think it's just a question of time before Israel is officially at war with Hezbollah. I mean, I think Hezbollah, if anything, is going to increase the pressure as Hamas falls. But we don't know for sure. But see, this is the thing. If the Psalm 83 war happens, there's a very good chance what's to follow is prophecies being fulfilled in Jeremiah 49. Jeremiah 49, which speaks of the location of where Iran has its nuclear program is destroyed, and it's going to cause Iran to have refugees leaving the country. Isaiah 17, which will result in Damascus no longer being a habitable city, but becomes a ruinous heap. And then we may also have Ezekiel 38 and 39 play out. So this could be the powder keg that gets everything going prophetically that's yet to be fulfilled in the Middle East. So when I ask that question, is this the start of the Psalm 83 war? If you were to tell me yes, I would say, okay, that's a strong indicator to me that the tribulation period is close, because our next question, I think, might also be very related to this. Let me show you. Whoops. There we go. Will there be a two-state solution? Now, if all this stuff goes down, Psalm 83, Damascus, even possibly Ezekiel 38, 39, there is going to be a cry for peace and safety. There may be a cry. There's already a lot of pressure, a lot more pressure here for two-state solution. And the two-state solution could indeed be a part of the covenant that is confirmed with many. We don't know for sure, but it very well could be there. It could also usher in the possibility of Israel getting green light to build the temple, rebuild the temple. So this right now is being pushed. It may get pushed more and more. Now, we know right now anti-Semitism is at a probably, I don't want to say an all-time high, but it's high. It's the highest it's been in recent history. Israel has a lot of political pressure on it, especially with the United States turning its back on her, which doesn't bode well for the United States. And that might connect to, is the United States going to be judged? If you turn your back on Israel, you don't have a nice resume. We already don't have a good resume with being allies, even being allies with Israel. If we take that out, we're begging for punishment. So it's possible that the two-state solution might come out of all this. And then the Antichrist is going to take this covenant and run with it, and then turn its back on Israel 3.5 years into the 7-year covenant. Two-state solution, right? For peace and security. Peace and security. Is that going to happen? Will that happen? Will Israel cave in under the pressure and say, okay, we'll do it? Will that be the solution? Now, we got to be careful here, guys, because it's funny how the world pushes something that is clearly contrary to what God's word says. This land is not to be given away. This is the land that was promised to Abraham and his descendants. Don't mess with God's property. It's a big problem. This is why I think that this will happen. Excuse me. Look what Joel says here. And let me take this question down for a second. Joel 3:2. I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. So that's Armageddon. Now listen to this. And will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel. So all the nations are coming against Israel in the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is outside of Jerusalem, and God's going to intervene for his people. Now he's referring back, now he's talking again about these nations. Whom? So see the whom they is referring to these nations that are gathered against Israel. Now, what did those nations do? What is the accusation that the Lord has against them? They have scattered among the nations. Okay, whom? The nations. They scattered who? Israel. Among the nations. And the nations, right? And parted my land. Oh! So you're telling me that God is showing what's going to happen in the final battle of Armageddon, when all the nations of the world, the Antichrist, brings all the nations of the world, Satan brings all the nations to surround God's holy people, and God allows this. And the accusations is that they scattered Israel throughout the nations, but the land was parted. God is holding an accusation against the nations of the world that you parted my land. So that's why I think there will be a two-state solution, because here, that's part of the punishment of the nations. They parted the land. Wow. Tell me that's not interesting. So I think that this is going to happen, guys. So will there be a two-state solution? Well, if I'm interpreting this correctly, I think the answer is going to be yes. And that's going to be trouble. Because I think the two-state solution, to be quite honest with you, is right at or around the time of the tribulation period. And so if there's so much pressure and talk about the two-state solution now, and if that gets implemented, what if it gets implemented this year? tribulation period possibly could happen this year. And if that means that, then we know the rapture happens this year, because we firmly believe that the rapture happens prior to the tribulation period. So with these 4 questions, let me get my kisser off the screen. You'll thank me. All right, let's take a look at these questions again. These are the 4 questions, and I know I'm going to pile them on top of each other. Don't let that bother you. I'll separate them. These are the questions. These are the questions I want answered. And by answering them, I think we're going to get somewhere. They're not really in any particular order of importance. But let's take a look at this here. Will there be a 2-state solution? Was the Great American Solar Eclipse a warning to the United States? Was the Revelation 12 sign a 7-year warning? Is this the start of the Psalm 83 war? Now, folks, if these all are yeses, yes, 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 then buckle up. Then buckle up. And in fact, I think it would be hard to understand if, let's say, 2 are yeses and 2 are no. And if they're all no's, then we're still waiting. I think we're still going to be waiting for a while. But what do you guys say? Does anyone out there think that these are all yeses? If these are all yeses, then do you see how close? Do you agree that these, let me ask you this. If these are all yeses, is it possible? Is it possible that the rapture's still far off? Unfortunately, the software I'm using right now, I can't do my poll, or I would do a poll. See, this software I'm using allows me to do graphics, but it doesn't allow me to do polls. The other software allows me to do polls, but not graphics. Unfortunately, I don't have software that does both. Sorry about that. So, yeah, I mean, you look at this, and are these are the 4 questions I came up with that I think are significant. And now, it doesn't mean these are the best questions that I could ask. There might be better questions out there, but you know what? These are, I think, important questions. So I'm going to shrink myself down a little bit. I think these are important questions. And here's the thing. I think that we're going to get our answer for each and every one of these by the end of 2024. So if we're here in 2025, maybe it would behoove me to revisit this video and say, looking back, we clearly have the answers to these. Or we should have the answers to these. But even the Psalm 83 war and the 2-state solution possibly could happen in 2025 or later. But it really would be confusing the celestial signs, because those would be hard to fit into the puzzle. Those would be puzzle pieces that are off to the side, having trouble fitting them in. Anyways, food for thought. This is not any reason for you to sell your farm or to quit your job or to do anything drastic. It's just thinking out loud. Go about the master's business And if he comes, praise be the Lord. And if he doesn't come, we keep pressing on. Keep pressing on. Please let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening. And as always, I hope to see you here, there, but especially in the air. God bless.